ManHood, brought to you in part by Solomon's Bespoke. ManHood, brought to you in part by Reboot Sports Drink.
So welcome to another episode of ManHood. Today is a very important discussion. I know that's something I always say because all the discussions we generally have are important and of national interest. Today the topic is the sound of the clang. And you may be asking yourself, what is a clang? Well, that's why we urge you to continue to listen. And without further ado, let me introduce our panel today. To my right, Johanse IODK, Behavior Change Consultant. To his right, Lalla, Attorney at Law, Honorary Consul to Slovenia, and so many other hats that he wears. And to his right, the Vibes God himself, Niall McNish. So, sound of the clang. We speak about that, and what it really means is the loss of freedom. So we're just going to dig straight into it. You know, I'd normally say my piece with regards to we're not speaking on behalf of all men. We are few men speaking to all men, and that this is a brotherhood. And this conversation here today, Sound of the Clang, really is about that brotherhood, about human rights, and about what happens when we lose that freedom. So let's just dig in straight into. I know what I mean by sound of the clang, but you know, let's.
Well, let me
ventilate.
just ask a question first. Has any one of us here ever had their freedoms removed from them?
Yes, as a child. I have plenty of things I wanted to do as a child, and my parents tell me I can't do it. So I start at base level, right? Understanding when I want to go out somewhere, I want to eat what I want to eat, and the authority that in that, let's say in a home, they stop me from doing whatever I want. And then let's say when I go in other environments, in school, right, there are certain things you cannot do in school. You might get detention, you might get punishment, you might get banned, you might get grounded, right? You can't go out anywhere. So that's a early taste of not having your freedom.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you're just a badly behaved child.
Yeah, I mean,
we
all have suffered that.
But I'm not free to do whatever I want.
But it's an understanding at that point that as a child, you are a child, and you have to account to your parents and listen to them, you're under the care of the parent. And as they would say, if you're a big man, right, then go out and earn your own money. But as long as you're living under this roof, you have to abide by my rules. So it's like any other environment. You know, we're in this studio, you can't just do what you want, right? There are rules that have to apply to this studio, this space, this organization. And that's part of what makes us, you know, as a society, it makes us...
No, really, you know, it's not that I can't do what I want. I could do whatever I want.
There are consequences. So, but what we're talking a bit more, and that's a good way to start, because in your mind at that point, you can't do what you want, but you're not affected in a way that makes you depressed or...
debatable or not.
It is debatable. Okay, but let's get into really the sound of the clang, meaning jail.
Right.
And there's a difference in, you know, whether it be in school, whether it be your parents, whether it be at work, and they're saying, you know, you want to do this, but you can't in your job. You still have freedoms. You have a choice. There's a choice, if we're to use that word. When you know, as they say, make a jail, there's the only choice is how you determine to yourself that you're going to survive that.
But there are other ways of your freedom being removed from you rather than making it. Because I was detained already. That's why I asked the question, where, you know, all this time I had a naivety of, you know, the consequences never really touch you until, you know, a police officer come and you no longer have the choice to do anything. You are now, you know, under controlled, being controlled. That was the most terrifying thing to me. And a lot of people never experience that. So when you say the sound of the clang, right? To me, it was sound of the click, right? And it really touched a nerve, especially on this topic. Now, I found that I was detained unlawfully. No, I am not. I don't, as a everyday man, I don't know a lot about the law, and which I should be. I feel like they should have some education process to teach at least younger children, because I was just out of secondary school.
So I don't want to cut you there, but I'm gonna cut you only because part of the discussion here today is a lot of work that OM is doing as well, specifically with human rights and answering those questions so that you know your rights in situations like that. And the conversation would have started by, several conversations that myself and OM and Prakash and so on had, where there are two sets of things that happen. Two persons, for all intents and purposes, are affected. The one that is in jail and the person that's outside. You're both almost living in, it's almost like someone with cancer. The person with cancer is affected, but the family is also affected. And when you hear the clang, the gate actually, the door actually closes and it makes that noise, clang. And I know there's a theory or a law or something called clanging gate. And again, I thought I was original with the sound of the clang. But the clanging gate, how that resonates through your body, or reverberates rather through your body at that time when the reality comes that, wait, my freedom is now lost, not just to yourself but to the family members, that they can no longer get to you in a positive way, that is something that is beyond comprehension. And we want to hear firsthand some of those experiences and what that reality is like, because most of us have never even seen a jail cell. We don't even know where it exists, whether it be in the court of justice, whether it be in Orange Grove, whether it be...
True. Can we start with, what's the description between a jail and a prison, or maximum security prison? Like, what's the difference?
Well, the maximum security is a jail, but there are different degrees of jails in terms of security, housing prisoners, where they're kept, in terms of their risk. There's remand. Remand means you're not yet convicted, you're pending your hearing.
So that's what remand yard is?
So that's what remand yard refers to. So there's remand yard in Port of Spain.
Oh, remand yard.
Yeah. So remand yard is a term that refers to you if you can't get bail, if bail is refused, and you're waiting the trial. So innocent until proven guilty. Then if you're convicted, then you go to serve your term either in Carrera, Port of Spain, or in one of the Aruca prisons that would house you according to the seriousness of your offense. Now, when we're looking at this context of this discussion, it's important to realize that there's a presumption of regularity in the system. In other words, everything is meant to operate in a perfect world. That's why laws are created. That's why you trust that all police officers are decent, law-abiding. They comply with the law. The judicial system works properly. There's fairness. So in an ideal world, it should work perfectly. But with anything far from that, and that's where the breaches of human rights take place. So like you rightly say, you think you were unlawfully detained. It's probably upon an examination with facts you were unlawfully detained. And why this conversation is important now, it becomes even more dangerous when crime is high. And we all live in fear. So there's a greater belief that let the police do whatever they have to, give them free rein. But when the free rein takes place, then there are breaches that take place also. And then what happens to the innocent people who, because this broad brush, crime, go ahead and run free rein because I just want crime to end. Then you have the errant and the delinquent and the corrupt police officers who not only break the law, but go beyond what is they're lawfully entitled to do. So, I mean, if you have committed a crime and caught red-handed and there's solid evidence and you have to go through due process, so be it. It's an international process. What our concerns are is what happens in the cases where there's an abusive process by the police, where they go beyond what they're lawfully entitled to do, but the system allows them to do it. And that's where the danger takes place. So it's one thing that, yes, you want people to be arrested, you want crime rate to go down, you want murder to go down, but at the same time, you can't give them a broad brush and say, well, let's surrender all our rights. Then you end up in a Syria type of environment where those who hold the power are allowed to do whatever they want with the power. And that's why lawyers play an important role to hold them to task in what they're doing. Now, sadly, gone are the days where you had a lot of vocal, vociferous lawyers fighting the system. I remember as a young lawyer, the names of Desmond Allen, Frank Solomon, Carl Hudson Phillips, well, Ramesh Maharaj is still around, but they were constantly fighting. And people looked at them, well, you're a lawyer, you're this, that, why you're fighting the system? But it's not that. It is making sure the balance operates. Because if you don't have somebody constantly creating the check and balance, then you're allowing people to say, well, I could do what I want. And what disturbs me now is a young generation of lawyers. Very few of them are inclined to even challenge the system. You have a few that are doing it, but gone are the days of the elders in the profession who took it very seriously and constantly did it. So the police always felt that level of pressure, lawful pressure, not anything of an abusive nature. And if you lose that, then the average citizen who can't afford a lawyer, who does not know what to do, is taken advantage of because nobody's there for him.
What do you think account for that younger generation not standing up?
Well, what has happened, there's been a watering down of the entire legal profession. You have 300 lawyers coming out a year now. You don't have the pupillage systems of back in the day where you had to go train, where you understood the value of doing pro bono work, doing free work, coming out as a young lawyer. That's all you did, free work, because you have no experience. But now that is no longer the norm. People don't even, young lawyers are not interested in that. And then also the system becomes very onerous and it can become almost vindictive against you. Why are you fighting the police? Why are you fighting the system? Why are you fighting the state? And then people want to move away from you because you become a rebel rouser all of a sudden. And people don't realize that it's not being a rebel rouser, it's making sure the system works. And with less and less lawyers who are prepared to stand up, then you have an undermining of the system taking place. And for us to sit down and hope that nothing happens, and it's only the bad guys get locked up, then we live in fool's paradise. Because anything could happen to any one of us at any time, and then you ask yourself, well, who coming to protect me?
Agreed. So one thing I know, Om, and we want to talk about it more in this segment too, you're taking front on that. You're being one of those persons to sort of reignite that passion and as one of the I would say, that a lot of lawyers up and coming, and even ones that exist there, that you mentor them or they look up to you, and in some of the human rights programs that you're involved in at the moment. What I want to come back to, just for a better understanding, because we want to really talk about the sound of the clang. Lawyers, as most people know, it's not who's innocent or who's guilty is what you could prove. Right? So a lot of times it's who have the better lawyer, who's done the research. But innocent or guilty, people end up behind bars. I want you to, based on your experiences, not just defending families, but being in this environment for plus 20, 30 years, paint a picture of what that looks like to anybody who's out there thinking to themselves, I could handle that.
And most people can't handle that because psychologically, remember, we have a constitutional right to freedom of movement. So we are brought up knowing that we can go anywhere, do anything we want, subject to the rules. But the minute handcuffs goes on your hand and your hands are put behind your back and you realize you can't move, you can't go anywhere, they put you in a cell. And remember, most of the cells in police stations are the most horrible conditions you can imagine. 5, 6 people in a cell, sometimes a slop bucket, no bathroom. The stench is incredible.
Elaborate was a slop bucket.
Slop bucket. In prison, for example, you'll have 10 men in a cell, no bathroom. So they'll have a paint bucket, a 5-gallon paint bucket with a cover. And you want to use the bathroom, that's what you use. And once for the day, you clean it. So the sanitary conditions are horrible. Now, the fact that I am innocent till proven guilty, should I be put in that condition and psychologically tortured? The answer is no, but many cases have been brought before the courts. Even the time factor it takes matters to be dealt with. And they all fail because the system is unable to keep up with the measures they need to put in place to allow you to be given proper conditions. Prakash did a case recently in the High Court. 24 years later, the trial is commenced and continues. Finishes, the men win. Now, 24 years, your life is on hold. Your family's property is tied up for bail. you're psychologically tortured, and it's considered as an acceptable practice. Nobody raises an eyebrow. So if you're innocent of whatever offense they charge you with, assault, whatever it is, you have to cater that's 5 to 10 years for a trial. The more serious a murder trial takes 15 years. What happens when you're innocent? So, yes, we think, well, if you're charged guilty, let the system condemn you, because we're all terrified by crime that the system is failing. But what happens to an innocent person, wrong place, wrong time, police induce them to do something, sign a statement, all of a sudden case closed, and you're sitting there for 20 years waiting, hoping your lawyer is good enough to get you out, and the system fails you completely. So I have done so many cases when I was more in the criminal arena of false confessions where the police will induce you, come, don't worry, sign this, they will write it off, you cooperate with us, you're going home. You signing away all your rights, you don't know better. And even though I had somebody recently come to see me, the police wanted a statement that in a matter, I gave them general advice, listen, be careful, make sure you have a lawyer. And people say, you want a lawyer because lawyers trying to promote themselves, but it's not that. We understand the principles of it, and we understand psychologically your brain goes into a different mode when your rights are taken away from you. So as good and bad and powerful as you think you are, they put you in a room and leave you for 10 hours to wait, sit down, no food, nothing, and you are handcuffed. And they come and say, you want to go home? Come, let's have a discussion, let's sign this. Well, in your brain, you're saying, I just want to go home. You're not thinking, well, I could be entrapped in a situation like that. Okay. And very often people sign things, they don't even know what they're signing, or they don't even agree to it, or they're misled into signing things that incriminate them.
If I could interrupt, one, I could give 2 quick examples, and I know we had to go to a break. Quick example is why having a lawyer is not just to promote, but it's important, because I had carried my mom car to clean by a well-known car wash, right, with a lot of immigrants, right? And they broke the rearview mirror, and they indicated that, well, it breaks, so you had to take care of it. But I was like, I didn't break it. It came off. And they are saying, I want to speak to a manager. Nobody was taking me on. They were just basically telling me, well, hard luck for me now. Right. It's only when I pull up my phone and say, well, I'm going to call my lawyer. Then suddenly a manager appeared. Then suddenly I started getting calls. So I was saying that because even to those out there, you don't have to have the most expensive lawyer in the world, but at least as a citizen, being able to exercise your right through the law is important, because it have people will try to take advantage of you. So with that, we talking about human rights, the rights that you may have, that you have to know. We have Lalla here, and we're going to a break.
Welcome back to ManHood. I'm Lalla, discussing the sound of the Clang. Now, I have engaged in an exercise of going to communities. A lot of what I have found over the years, people don't know their basic rights in the country. And while you need a lawyer, it's important that we're taught in schools and we all know what our basic rights are. And so many people are taken advantage of because they don't know the simple rights, that I have the right to remain silent. I have the right to a lawyer, friend, or relative. I have the right to know what you're investigating, why you're arresting me. So these are fundamental principles, but these are brushed under the carpet. And it's only when a lawyer comes in, he's the one who is authorized to tell you those are your rights. And I think everybody should know what their basic lawful rights are. This is not a secret. So I have been going to communities. My friend Gavin Hero, who's a military specialist, has accompanied me. And more communities are calling us just a lecture in terms of teaching people what their basic rights are. How do you understand when you're confronted? When do you give a statement? When do you not give a statement? How you could implicate yourself? How do you get bail? How does the system work? Because we can't survive living in a bubble, hoping that nothing bad happens to us. And when it happens, we could get the right lawyer to get us out. But very often I tell people, your first 24 hours of any situation is your most critical. The best lawyer in the world can't help you if you implicate yourself.
Sign away your rights.
And people sign away their rights all the time in the country. And I've heard even young lawyers telling clients that, you need to give the statement because they ask you. Now, I don't mean don't give a statement in the context of not cooperating with the police, but you have to understand the context of what is happening to you. Is something wrong here? Am I under investigation? The minute the police say you can't leave, and they very often will tell you you're not under arrest, but can I leave? No, you're under arrest. Once you detain my freedom, there's arrest. So police will tell people, don't worry, you're not under arrest, but don't leave the room. There's arrest. Okay. And once you know you're under arrest, well, hold on, something wrong here, because now I am the subject. And if I'm the subject, I have to be careful what I'm saying. Because very often you might say something innocently, thinking it's the truth, and it may be the truth, but the English language is a funny thing. And we come back to like lawful firearm cases. I've done so many cases where people are involved in situations of self-defense. They give an account under a fearful, sort of traumatized environment, and the way they worded it makes them the subject of being charged. And then 10 years later, they're still waiting for a trial. But the fact is, in principle, they're innocent, but the way they explained it. And you have to understand, once police arrest you or you're in that traumatic situation, unless you're you're very tough mentally, that trauma that runs you, the first things I want to get out of here. Correct. I want to see what best I could do to release my... So you're going to think in your brain, well, okay, this man been real nice to me. And they always play good cop, bad cop. Somebody will come and rough you up. Somebody will come and say, don't worry, it's all right. And all that is operating in your head, how I getting out of here. And that is like the more you try, the tighter the noose comes around your neck.
If I could just interject and to add to what you're saying, in my professional capacity, some years ago I worked for the Victim Support Unit of the TTPS, and in that capacity, you get to support the victims of crime, but sometimes even in the station itself, because we used to have duties where we in the station just in case anybody need any assistance. And you would see the difference, the psychological difference, because somebody could come in big and strong with bravado, but once the police say you can't leave, that changes,
Okay.
Right? And I'm saying that because plenty of people just feel the big and the bad, right? I have even seen people from, let's say, places I've grown up where, they're in bad man thing. But once they're in that station, once they're behind bars, there's a change. But sometimes you don't even know who talking to. I remember once doing some counseling in prison, passing by a cell and somebody called my name, right? And even the way they spoke, I couldn't believe it's this person, because outside, I know the kind of attitude and the kind of personality they have. But then they say, Johanse, and when I realized who it is, and if it was a big dog outside, now it's just a puppy, right? And this is not putting shade on the person or bad talking them anyway, because all of us, right, even being in prisons, I remember the first time being in, I think was Porter Spring prison, was the first prison, even just the environment, right? And this wasn't even in a working capacity. I went to visit someone, right? And just being there, it was humbling. I felt small in a big place, right? Standing up outside, waiting in line to go in. I didn't even reach inside yet. So I say that because plenty of people say, well, I could make a jail, right? I could handle police. I could handle certain things. Now, this is not to instill fear, but it's to understand that sometimes you're saying something and you don't have no knowledge of it.
Well, but
and that now I wanted to ask you the question. Or the input, but that is the nature of this conversation here today. When I say the sound of the clang, when you feel you could handle it, but like you said, you have no knowledge of it, and that is what we're here to discuss here today, because I want, Om being first-hand at that, and of course you being just as curious as I am, for us to really have an understanding of what that means. To some persons, they say measure twice, cut once, to really think before you act. Because when you go down that rabbit hole, or it's presented to you, whether you're looking for it, whether you've done something wrong or not, right? The circumstances, jail don't know no difference at that point. And there are other things, for example, where you spend 24 hours or 48 hours in jail. All of those things, the impact that will have on you still psychologically, because there's no difference, as Om said. There's no difference between who you get put in with. At that point, when you get put in that holding cell or remand, it's everyone waiting for some sort of trials.
So I'm in remand yard. I am there for some small infringement. You telling me that I'll be sitting or in a cell with someone who's potentially a murderer?
You sitting with everybody. Something as simple as child maintenance, and they issue a warrant for you. You in the same remand yard with the man charged for murder. And remember, the gang culture in prisons is a serious thing. So you also have to learn how to survive inside there. So it's not that you go in there and you're a bad man, you know. There are rules in prison. There are gangs that operate and there are procedures that operate. So you're stripped of not only your dignity, but psychologically, you have to decide how do you survive in there. And as much as people feel, oh, I could deal with the police, I could do this and that, the reality of it is you're dealing with an imperfect system too. If you had swift justice to say, all right, I'm arrested, within a year my matter would be heard, it could be determined, you could say, all right, I could handle that. But the matters take so long. And remember, our detection rate and our prosecution rate is less than 5%. Could you imagine if they really started to lock up people and you were doing 20, 30%, the prisons would be overflowing. And you have so many people that go through this. And remember, when you come out of it and you come out of prison, you're never psychologically the same, you know.
Agreed. So
Never.
I want Johanse to talk a bit more about that. So guys, I want you all to remember these points. I want you to talk more about what the psychological impact is when you leave, if you do get your freedom back again, the psychological impact it has on your family. And I've given everybody little points that I want them to touch on. So, I also wanted to talk more about charge, the difference between charge and conviction, because people are walking about being charged and their case hasn't been seen for 20 years. But before we get into that, Niall, I wanted to express, having got that information, tell me what goes on in your mind now.
Well, it's a lot, actually. Well, one, what I would question is, isn't the point of prison to crush you mentally? Like, isn't that the whole point of, removing certain individuals from society to basically squeeze them mentally? I'm trying to find the best ways because my mind is a punishment.
That's what I wanted to ventilate that, and I want to explore what, because right now your mind is blown in many ways.
For sure.
Right? Because of this information, which is what we're trying to communicate to everyone out there, based on first-hand information from home. But I know you experiencing it. I know I've had so many conversations with home about this, so I'm not less blown away by it.
Gotcha.
Because I haven't had, nor do I want to have the experience. But that visual that he's painting there, and it's home Lalla, so it's first hand. As somebody who now has probably taken freedom for granted, and you say certain things like, I know so and so, and I know this one, and I know that one, right? But before you get the call, you could be inside.
No, well, for me now, remember, I was briefly detained. And what I'd seen, hearing this, right, showing how close I was to be sitting down in remand yard, innocent, but I have to wait there amongst the general public who also they're waiting for trial. I don't know what other people doing, guilty or innocent, but I could easily be that close. So if it wasn't for that one police officer who was like, let them boys go now, right? It could easily be, so my question is, it's unfair. It feels unfair. It feels.
And what is even more unfair? Remember, if you get charged, and you can get charged, it's an absurdity. We still have annoying language, obscene language, on our law books. That police, I don't like how you looking. What? You cuss me? Come here. Your word against it. Since I in practice charging people for resisting arrest, obscene language, annoying language. And is your word against their word?
Annoying
Annoying.
language.
Yeah.
That's on the law books?
That's it. So
answering back and things like that, annoying language.
No, but then who is there to judge it?
Yeah.
So you're in a situation, all of a sudden, handcuff, you're in a cell there because they say you cuss.
So nobody ever legislated change this?
Well,
annoying language.
You have to ask the parliamentarians who sit there how they perpetuate these things. So the simplest man, if police want to give him a charge, so you cuss me, right? Your word against. 3 years later, You go into court every time. And bear in mind, remember the hardest part about it, if you don't come from money, you don't have access. Remember how you get bail. So only now they're creating cash sureties that you could put money. But remember, you get charged for whatever it is, resisting arrest, this, that. The magistrate says 20,000 bail or something like that. Unless they're putting it surety for you to be the surety. But there's a bail condition. Most people can't raise it. And then they don't have family who have a deed. Bail is so archaic. Because bail should be. This is important.
No, this. I want to. We're going to go to a break just after, but I want you to really go through. This is going to be an extended segment, so don't worry. A lot because a lot needs to be discussed here. But only recently, when I say recently, a couple of years back, when some friends of mine were charged wrongfully, you started to really understand bail, and again another.
What is bail?
Another situation where people think, oh, bail, I could just pay that. So, I want you to go into it not so easy to get.
And bail, in principle, is meant to be a guarantee that you would actually show up for your case.
Gotcha.
So the intention of bail is to make sure that you have a hearing, you will come, you will attend your hearings, and you'll have it determined. But very often, bail is used as a punishment, and the legislators like to use it as a deterrent. So, again, most people who are in remand can't afford bail.
Gotcha.
In the US, you have something called bail bonds, which is far more sensible. And that's where you have these marshals that go out, bounty hunters. So their duty is to make sure you come to court. Okay. But you have a system that is against the average person who can't raise bail. So half the people in remand yet can't get bail.
And it's not a simple case of just getting the cash. There are conditions.
What's the conditions?
Well, the conditions vary. So you have bail that you can have in your own surety, where you give a guarantee you will come, in the most minor offenses. But when it gets more serious, they mean the security of a property, or they made a cash bond.
So if you don't,
this is your one.
But let me just try to clarify certain things, right? So boom, property, right? I have my property or my mother property. They'll put that up, the deed up for bail. I'm able to go free up before my case. If I don't come to court, what happens?
But even that deed is not as simple as you just have ownership of the property.
Remember, when you get, if you're arrested and charged, you have to have not only your deed, but the last land and building tax, which is like 5 years ago when they collected it, was 6 years. You have to have water, light bill, ID.
So very often have to fall on the deed.
So imagine.
So I can't be squatting at all.
Well, squatting is out the door.
Gotcha.
But imagine you get locked up on a Friday. They say bail. You go to the registrar and they say, but you don't have all these things. Who keeps all those documents standby waiting for bail?
Correct.
And the point is, it becomes a lien on the property. So remember how bail works is if you don't show up, they'll forfeit either your property for the value or the cash. Yeah. So there'll be a notice of show cause.
10%?
Well, the point is people pay 10% and it's illegal. So imagine you have a system which operates very well, where people pay bailers, professional bailers, to get bail because that's the only way they can do it. But it is an illegal system.
Really?
So you force people in a situation where they have to go and pay people, and that's where you've seen a lot of fraud cases with deeds being used 5-6 times for bail. But you give people no option. How many people have access to a deed that they could just say, and their parents or their friend or relative will say, no problem, I like you so much, I'm willing to surrender my deed. The world
that you show up to court.
But the world has moved on so much in terms of how you deal with these, and we're still living in the dark ages.
So the apprehension is real. I could imagine to everyone listening and viewing out there, the questions you may have yourself and the alarm in thought and the unease in thought at this moment. So as I said, we're going to extend this particular segment because this information is vital. It's vital. And all coming down to the sound of the clang, innocent or guilty. So we take a short break.
Hi, welcome back to ManHood. I'm Niall, and we're talking about the sound of the clang. Now, I just have a couple more questions about the bail structure, right? What exactly happens with the 10% that I've heard being thrown about a couple times.
But before you get there,
Okay.
every offense, well, most offenses entitled to bail. Some do not entitle to bail. Recently, the law changed that murder, you can get bail for murder, but it's very, very difficult to get bail in murder
you can
cases.
now.
You can now, but it's very difficult to get bail in murder. And the court takes into account a number of factors: the seriousness of the offense, your previous criminal record, what is the nature of how aggravating the offense is. And bail conditions usually relate to that. So in other words, the onerous nature of the bail depends on the offense. So some of the conditions could be reporting to a police station every 2 or 3 days, surrendering your passport. Those are restrictions imposed on you. And then the court can determine a quantum of bail. So they may say, look, bail with a surety, which means you have to have a guaranteed bail, where the deed comes in, that may amount to $150,000, $100,000. So that becomes almost a lien or a hold, or call it a mortgage on the property. Okay. But the court may very well also say, in the alternative, a cash bond can be paid, which would be a much lower sum, could be $20,000, $25,000. And that is dealt with the registrar of the court. So that's how it works. Now, the common culture is there are bailers that exist out there.
Right. And
a bailer will normally tell you, pay 10% of the value of the bail, and we will organize the
Let me just separate. So a bailer now, I'm assuming, is that they're going to take on the responsibility
Correct.
of paying the court your fee.
So they would...
And you now owing them, essentially.
So they would surrender their deed.
Okay,
to the
they
court.
put up their
And,
deed.
and like I say, that is not a
10%.
legal recognized process. It
It's not.
exists. No. So this is not something that is sanctioned.
It's
If the
like
court,
I believe that
if the
to know.
court hears that you're doing that, the court will frown on it, because the court wants to know who is the bailer, what's your relation, who is this person, because they want
But
to know.
frown
there's
on it doesn't mean...
Well, they can also not accept it.
Okay.
But you see, this is where the fast takes place. How many people have access to deeds? Why not regularize a system? If bail is really meant to allow your attendance, put a robust system in where you pay 10% to a bail bondsman who has the responsibility, who's accountable to the court, who is somebody that's certified by the system. So there's full accountability. So this day and age, imagine you're innocent for cussing the police or doing something of that nature, or resisting arrest, and you can't get bail and your matter running for 2-3 years. How fair that could be? You lose your job, your family doesn't know what to do. Complete disruption.
So I want to, because we could go on and on about bail, and it's fascinating and not in a negative sense, but again, information or knowledge is power, and now you know. And so now, just to put it in context, you don't have a deed for your house, something happens and you don't have the cash, and you decide to go to get someone else's deed, it's illegal. Basically.
Well, a professional bailer, so you could go to a friend or relative or
Right.
somebody you know. But there are people who do this as a profession.
I
there's
know
no...
it have a whole strip
Of
for
course,
them.
of course.
Correct.
So nobody is charged, but it's in principle illegal because the system is broken. So that is the only way you could go. Otherwise, people would never get bail.
Right.
And that should be regularized.
So it's necessary. That's why
it's a necessary
frowned upon.
evil, but the courts will know it's not legal.
frown.
But you have no choice because how else people access
That's
bail?
wild to think about.
And in this day and age, we're still talking about this.
What I wanted to talk, because you mentioned it there in passing, we speak about the word charge. There are a lot of persons out there in the ether and in the environment walking around and have certain levels of freedom. They might not be in jail, but they have that charge looming on them. Right? Now, we talked about the system, the judicial system, and it could take years to have your case called, etc., and the impact it has on you in just being charged. How else, in terms of the person that's walking around, how else does that impact you? Is it you can't travel? Is it like, what are the implications of somebody walking around charged?
Anybody who is charged, it has a terrible psychological impact on them. Now, fortunately, now a lot of people are getting accustomed to virtual, so it's a lot easier. But when you go in court and there are 50, 60 people in a magistrate's court, you have to wait 3 hours for your matter to be called, and you're sitting with all sorts of people charged with different things. It has that psychological impact on you. It's also humiliating. Your name getting called outside. You come before the court. But what you don't realize, something simple like cussing the police, which is the most basic thing, or annoying language or resisting arrest, you found guilty for that, you might get a fine, but your criminal record stays like a birthmark for the rest of your life. So anything you're applying for, job, anything will come up that you have a criminal record.
If convicted.
If convicted. Yeah. Even if you plead guilty and pay a fine.
No, but if you could be charged, but then when you get your day in court, you exonerated.
But remember, sometimes people, I've done so many cases in the past where people, the police say, listen, boss, just go and plead guilty now. The magistrate will fix you up, don't worry. Because the police, remember, they're doing a job. The quicker they get rid of you, the better. And people innocently will say, you know what, I plead guilty. 5 years down the road, they're looking for a job. Look, you have a criminal record here. You can't get a U.S. visa with a criminal record. With the simplest offense, they will...
Even a record expunged after 5 years?
No, for life. Right. The only way to get a record expunged is to apply to the president. So simple matters, you can have that as a stain for the rest of your life. And very often people will advise you, look, just plead guilty, don't worry. But you don't know what is operating in the magistrate's mind. And every magistrate, although there are rules they operate by, they all are different in terms of their sentencing practice. So they may just say, well, look, pay $1,000 fine. Okay, I could pay it and get out of it. I know I was innocent, but I don't want to spend the next 5 years. But with it comes the stain of that criminal record for the rest of your life. So you're a young person, you're applying for a job, you want to go abroad, you want to better yourself. You can't do it, you're finished. So long ago, a lot of people got, when marijuana was illegal, to have a joint, your record finished because of that. So the point is, when you're innocent in an environment that is not a properly administered system. So I might be innocent for whatever infraction I come with. But after 5, 6, 7 years of waiting, paying lawyer every 3 months to go to court, my family did. I just want to get out of this. And out of sheer frustration, sometimes people just buckle under the pressure. It's so much you could take and no more. So and that's where it comes back to the point I made earlier. You run on the presumption of regularity. It's a perfect system, but it's not a perfect system. And what I always am concerned about is the people who are innocent, who are wrongly taken advantage of, whose rights are infringed, and who end up paying a price for something they never did because of an imperfect system.
So, really thankful for, of course, the work that you're doing home, in taking, it is you've established yourself, and now it's your give back to the community, and credit must be given to you, and of course, even being here today, sharing that information. Sure. If you had 5 points, if somebody was to hold up their hand and you had 5 points that they would give, because like ourselves here and persons outside, hearing this information is going to have people very nervous and uncomfortable. Crime is one thing, but to realize that you could be part and parcel of that same that same environment, and the same, even innocent, and among the same people that you now fear, what are 5 things that you would tell to that person to maybe alleviate their fears, or just to be prepared for? One of which is probably organize, or have some sort of bail plan.
Well, first of all, you need to know what your rights are. You need to know you have a right of silence if you're being accused of something. That's a constitutional right. Nobody could tell you or force you have to speak. Know that anything you say will be used against you. Anything you put in writing will be used against you. Understand also, when you're traumatized in a situation, whether it's a fender bender, whether it is a traumatic domestic situation, anything, you don't think clearly and you're likely to say the wrong thing. If you're in a situation where you feel traumatized, say, I'm traumatized, I can't say anything right now. If you're put in a situation where you are arrested, detained, and wrong things happen to you, they beat you, they threaten you to do anything, and you're forced to give a statement, do it. But immediately after, contact somebody to go and make a report in a station diary or in a police station or somewhere that you have a record that shows at the earliest opportunity, I was forced to do something that I was not doing of my free will. That can help you in a trial. And while we want the police service to work, and while we always praise the good officers, but at the end of the day, we have to have a system that protects the innocent in the system and not allow the police to use the system in a way to victimize people. Because there are a lot of cases, there are a lot of rogue officers out there that take advantage of people. And you have to be aware of your rights. And that's why the community segments I am doing. And anybody who wants to hear from me in any community church, temple, community center, contact me. I will come, I'll lecture for free because we need to educate people as to what their rights
I don't
are.
want to give out your cell number, but is there a way to contact you? Is it
Well, I mean,
an
they can
email
call,
address
they
or
can
something
call
set
my
up?
office 625-5074 if you want to set up a discussion on knowing your rights. We need to educate in the school. Every child coming out of O levels should know, listen, these are my rights. And people look at the rights and say, well, you're doing this, you're educating the criminal. But it's not that. Why should we not as citizens be aware of our rights? If you commit the crime, the police with proper investigation will...
Even that statement, erroneous educating the criminals, because the criminal element in the country is less than 50% of the population.
Exactly,
so
but
if you're educating
But there's a misnomer. That's why people say if the police hold you, it's good for you, was doing something wrong anyway. And we have to break that trend. Let the police conduct proper investigations, let them have proper evidence, and force the criminal justice system, which is going at snail's pace, to work properly. But that could only happen if people are aware of their rights.
Is it? They say it's better to release 12 guilty than to convict one innocent?
That's an old adage in the criminal law, because one innocent person being wrongly convicted means the whole system is broken. And every day you see cases. Look, I'm doing a case right now where somebody is involved, a businessman has some connection with the police in a particular area and falls out with his common law wife. She's detained in a cell for 5 days, no access to bail, because to teach her a lesson. And they condone that. Her recourses now is to sue the police alone. How today these things are happening. And that shows that it could happen to anybody. And unless the commissioner of police could come out and say, my police service is squeaky clean, we have to keep fighting, making people aware of their rights and holding those in authority accountable. Because the one person who is innocently taken advantage of is one too many.
So it's almost our time to wrap. But I want to get to the point of the psychological impact. So Niall, things could have been a whole different story for him. He could have been worse off mentally than he is now in terms. And I only bring in some light to the moment because it's heavy. It's heavy to what is going on in my mind, what's going on, I'm sure, in other person's mind. Even though I sit here now free, and there's a statement, freedom is not free. But in context, we are here. As long as we abide by laws, we have choice. And I haven't experienced, and I nor do I want to experience the sound of the Clang, but I was trying to make light of a moment because it's heavy right now getting this information. I'm not saying you're desensitized to it, but you are, knowledge is power. You know what to do. And in that moment, most people will not know what to do. So to say I'm in fear of my life or I'm traumatized, as preparation is just that. Prepare for those moments so that when it happens, and the likelihood of it happening in some capacity.
Let me not say when.
When it happens, because we're not just looking at, you want muscle memory. And so now, based on this conversation here, guys, today, it's not just that we are concerned about crime, right? Crime and criminality in terms of something happening to us, like being robbed or raped or all the other things, as innocence outside of that, based on the persons that we turn to. To control that environment, we could be subject to such an environment. It can't. There is a possibility it can't happen, and we're trying to put things in place to prepare us for an unlikely moment. But psychologically, to someone who has endured that, what does that look like?
Well, one, I have not endured it myself, so I come in from a strictly professional and even personally, because I've had personal experiences with people who've been detained, incarcerated, and even convicted, right? It strips you of who you are. It strips you of almost everything of your identity, because sometimes even your name, right? People don't call you by your name when you're in prison. You become something else. And that's on one end for you, and I've seen.
But even when you leave, even when you gain freedom for some reason, whether you're innocent or guilty.
I've never seen anybody leave the same, and I'm sure, Lalla, you could say the same thing, because even if you want to look on an international stage, right? When Buju Banton came out of prison, you could see
He was
that's a different person.
Same thing with Cartel.
Vibes, you could see that's visibly a different person. It takes almost everything of who you are, and what is replaced with is a shade of who you were and even who you want to be. Because a lot of us, in terms of not necessarily arrogance, but we feel that we have a certain authority because we know how to navigate the free world. Right? I am a teacher, I am a father, I am a behavior change consultant, I am these things that I feel authority for. But all of that gone. All of that disappears. Or I am the baddest man on the block. Or I have guns, I had money, I had whatever it is. Now all of that gone.
So based on what you're saying, Yohanse, it seems like prison is working because you don't want these people to return to society like how they were.
Well, I would say no, because I wasn't there when the prison system was created in Trinidad to know what was their purpose. But international standards is rehabilitation, whereas you're supposed to come out a better person than you went in because you're reintegrating into society. So a broken person, even though he may not be violent anymore, right? A broken person is not a healthy person back in society. And then the flip side is sometimes you're so angry at the system, you come out now rebellious against the system or people or erratic. So if you come out worse than you went in, it's definitely not working. And I would say, Lalla, thank you, one, for bringing this, because one, as a man and as men who, whether it is you're alone, you have a family to protect, you have children, etc., knowledge is power, and understanding how to navigate society is an important thing. And I myself now going to take, even for my responsibility, one, to attend your series, two, to even understand things a little better so I could help myself, help my family, and also even help others. So thank you very much for that.
And we have to be our brother's keeper. That's why the information is important. That's why this show is important. It's empowering each other, because if we're not looking after each other and empowering and educating, then we're also responsible and we're part of the problem. And that's why I encourage young lawyers, do something. Don't only just sit down and twiddle your thumbs, because if you have the knowledge, you have to share it. Prison in Trinidad fails. You're meant to rehabilitate. Yes, you're meant to punish. But you go in thieving mangoes, and you in a cell with a man who's a gang leader, you coming out graduating to a different level, because your brain now has a wire to survive, and you're going to now not come out rehabilitated, but come out worse. And we have to move away from the fact that prison is just a house. You punish you and let you come out in a way that's far worse than you ever went in. It is important that people understand their rights. It's important that we're not fighting the police, we're not against the system, we're not hating on anybody. But in order for the system to work, people have to robustly defend and know their rights so that the system could work the way it was meant to work. It does not work the way it's meant to work. Too many innocent people are taken advantage of. If 90% of this country is law-abiding and 90% of people know their rights and can hold the system accountable, the system has no choice but to work properly. But if we all live in fear and we're always in our back foot because we're afraid of anybody in uniform or authority, it will never work, and then we're going to get to a situation where crime, as it already is a runaway horse, will make all of us subservient to a broken system.
That's a clip right there. For me, my closing thoughts, I'll keep it short. In whatever you do, get a lawyer first. Whether it's opening a business, anything that you want to accomplish in life, get somebody who understands the law better than yourself, and they will walk you through the process.
Mine's going to be even shorter than that. Bad things happen when good people do nothing. So do something about it. And being right is, we stand a lot of times and say, I want to be right. I'm right. And yes, you may be right, but in a lot of cases, as we've discussed here today, you may win the battle, but you'd lose the war. So figure that out again. As you said, Yohanse, knowledge is indeed power. We have the knowledge here today. So with that being said, Yohanse, Om, Niall, thanks once again. This has been a very impacting and powerful conversation. The sound of the clang, I pray that you never experience that, either behind or in front of.
ManHood, brought to you in part by Reboot Sports Drink. ManHood, brought to you in part by Solomon's Bespoke.